So, what do you like about the idea?
Um, I like I like where you're starting the film. Actually, I like the fact that you're not just starting it with like him in an orphanage and dropping the paperwork and things like that. I think it's a nice starting point, and I like the idea of flashbacks.
Mm.
It'd be interesting to see how you do, like how the viewer of the film would know that it's a flashback.
Mhm.
It's good to know, like, think about how you're going to do, the actual flashback moment, because particularly if it's an opening sequence,
Mm.
you haven't got like had much time to get to know that character.
Yeah.
It's hard to know whether it's a flashback or whether it's like part of their real life or whether they're mentally unstable or something.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a nice place to start the film, though. I like that idea.
Okay.
I think you explain the character well as well in the plot. Like the backstory is really clear, like about his mother's dying, so why his dad has got into drugs as well. You're not just like his dad's a druggie. Like you explain why that's happened.
So you like the complex narrative
Yes, exactly.
and the intimacy between the characters.
That's exactly what I like. Yeah.
There you go. Is there anything that you don't like or you find maybe a bit confusing?
I don't particularly like the way he finds out that his dad tried to get in contact.
Yeah.
Like, not sure I find it realistic that he would be carrying that paperwork and then he'd just drop it.
Yeah.
Almost, it would be. I would almost. That's the bit I'm not so sure on. It doesn't seem as realistic to me. So.
Is there any other way that you think that we could do it?
I wonder if it's almost like he's being called into someone's office for something, and he sees, I don't know, his name.
Oh, so he like catches it out of the corner of his eye.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. That's nice. Yeah.
And maybe he goes back into the office at another time, and
So something a bit more mysterious, other than obvious.
Yeah, exactly. I just think, it's a bit of a coincidence that he'd be carrying the very papers and he'd happen to drop it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree with that, actually. I think that although it is quite a good idea to have what we've originally put in, I can see where you're coming from because it is quite simplistic. And obviously this is for a British independent, and so it has to be quite, a well understood film, and a lot of people need to have quite a lot of, sophistication to understand it. Or to understand it at a nice level, and I think that's kind of bringing in more of a unsophisticated audience.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it could be made sort of you're it's almost a bit too simple for the audience. I think they'll be watching it.
Okay, so having read our idea, what did you like about it?
I really like how naturalistic it seems. It's good that it's a very human story with a very clear kind of dramatic through line trajectory. It seems like it's got a really engaging dramatic arc, and because we see the film, I presume, from kind of one character's point of view, it's going to be quite interesting to see, and quite sort of dramatically beneficial that it's from one point of view. Yep.
Is there anything that you didn't like about it?
There wasn't anything that I didn't like about it. I think maybe you need to think about putting yourself in the position of that specific character, and the sort of naturalism of the film will come from sort of in-depth research into how people react in those institutions and in that environment, and being brought up in those conditions. That would be the most important thing, I think. But I don't. There's nothing about it I didn't like. No.
Okay. Is there anything that you would change if this was your production?
Not really. No, I think it's a really engaging film, and I think, as I said, it's really clear, and that's important. And if you're telling a story from the point of view of one sort of lead character, I think it's important that you have a very clear grasp of who he is, or she is, and in this case he, but in their intentions. And I think that it is clear in the synopsis of the plot that happens. I kind of know, I understand in a sense who he is and where he's going and why he wants to get there. I get the journey, the sort of literal journey and the emotional journey. So no, there isn't a lot I would change. No.
If you were talking specifically about the opening sequence, if you were to film it, how would you go about it? I mean, would there be any specific technical elements, framing, etc., that you would specifically look at?
Well, the important thing about an opening sequence is that it allows you to, as a filmmaker, to sort of set out your stall, if you like, as to what kind of film you might be making, the audience might be watching. So it's interesting that you might get to you get a chance to sort of immediately let the audience understand the sort of pace of the film, the kind of the genre of the film. The way you shoot it is very important as to how the audience initially reacts to the movie and the experience, but also it gives you the opportunity to, if you want to, subvert that. So what's nice about the opening sequence, I would think in this case, is that it's not necessarily the start of the film, i.e. it's not the start of the story. It's nice to keep the audience guessing, and given that the film opens with a guy at a railway station, we're constantly asking ourselves questions about why he would be there or where he might be going. And I think that's a more intelligent and interesting way of opening it necessarily than opening it in the orphanage, because you can always go back to that. There's no reason why you can't sort of shift the sort of temporal nature of the film. You can go back and forth. You can flash back if you want to, but at the same time, it's nice to allow the audience to make their own mind up as to where this guy's come from and find out later on what his backstory is. How I would shoot it, it really completely depends what kind of movie you're going to make. I think if you're going to shoot the train station sequence as the opening of the film, then I would say try and make it as intriguing as possible. So give away as little as humanly possible, because at this stage in the process of watching the film, the audience will be, they're most engaged, if you like. So I think you can get away with sort of less is more. I would say I would sort of offer up some information, but not all the information. I would kind of keep a lot back and sort of just construct a story through visuals and not a lot more than that, really.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to say or add about it?
Not really. I think if you're going to write the entire film and make it as a film, I think the most important thing to do it justice is to do as much research as you possibly can on orphanages and how people get put into them and why they get taken away from their parents legally, so that you get all of that exactly right. Because it's a very human story. I think it deserves some time for you to take some time over actually researching how the law is and how situations are, how people exist in orphanages and away from their parents. I think that's really important to getting for the main character's point of view too, but also the backstory needs to be pretty clear. But yeah, that's all I'd say. A lot of research, but that would be about it.
Okay, so having read our idea, what did you like about it?
The kind of building suspense in it was good, and the kind of intrigue of kind of what's going on, like what's his dad about, and you can imagine it kind of developing like the whole. I don't think they have orphanages anymore, but have you ever seen the film Scum?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So that kind of
yeah, like really gritty, like quite hard hitting,
like that.
Yeah.
And him kind of going through the distraught of kind of being lost and stuff.
So you like all the quite like despairing tone and like quite upsetting themes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill's kind of you got to build it so you feel for him, and so you got to like the character and understand that he's been through a lot and whatever, and build it up, and then you kind of if you want to kind of if you're kind of riding for him to kind of be success and to have a happy ending or some sort of ending.
Is that how you would prefer it, or would you prefer it to be like completely open-ended, so there isn't really any particular like route that he goes down on the ending, or would you prefer that there is a solid ending where we all know what is going to happen from now on?
You kind of want to build it as an arc, don't you? You're going to want it to be depressing that his mum dies, and then his dad's a druggie, and then he just gets beaten up, and it's just I see like a light that he has some sort of potential, something to happen in the end that even if you don't know explicit about it, but at least it doesn't end kind of. I don't really know how you do it in this story, but you kind of that you meet someone I don't know has a foster parent or something. I don't know, just some sort of light at the end.
Yeah. So
you're gonna be gunning for him, and you're gonna kind of. You don't have to. It can be really sad, but you kind of if that's the case, you need to kind of really root for the character.
So you want the character to feel some sort of like sense of hope and like happiness, almost like relief at the end of the film.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would change from what you read?
Just only because people, if you're aiming at people who are our age, then people are like a really particular about is that suspending disbelief.
Yeah.
So there's any facts that are kind of like, oh, well, I just don't think that's right. Was this meant to be set in modern day? Or is
this is happening now.
Right, but in terms of like factual stuff, kind of like I don't think people get put in orphanages anymore.
Okay.
I think you go to social services, and social services try to get foster parents, or they put you into something that isn't quite a home. So
you think that maybe he could go to like a foster family instead of?
I think that'd be better. You might have some lightness in there if you've got like a really nice foster family, but the other kids that are in the foster family, like his foster brothers, sisters, are real bastards to him. That might be the bit that he can be the one raised. But and like the whole kind of question of when you're adopted, you have your real parents, but you have your adopted parents, and they're really nice to you for you. And actually, I don't know, maybe if you had like a really strong character that was someone in a foster parent that looked after him. So yeah, I don't think the orphan and maybe a drug addict is probably. I don't know if parents become drug addicts, but maybe an alcoholic would be a good one.
Ah, okay. So something a little bit more basic rather than.
But it's still exactly the same story. But
yeah.
It's alcohol. He comes in. He's still got bottles of vodka on the floor. When he sees him again, you realise.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So sort of the same kind of theme. So you think that he should still turn to some sort of comfort, but instead of drugs, it should be drink.
Yeah, basically. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's probably more believable in the situation. It's kind of a lot. The only recommendation is kind of try and find. There are loads of stories out there of people who've been through this situation.
Yeah.
And just do some research, read up about people who've been put into care, people who've had alcoholic parents.
Yeah.
Kind of steal. If you're actually making it into a longer script, just kind of look into their stories and steal their little anecdotes about what it was like. But that can make sense. Kind of, I like the story of kind of the beginning of. I don't like the story, but I like kind of like the horror when his mum died.
Yeah.
Imagine his dad kind of wanting to support him and doesn't really know how to because he's never really been. His mum's always been the one who really looks after him, and he kind of loses hope, doesn't know what to do, and he turns to drink. And then I don't think the government put you into rehabs. I think it's probably like social services, like probably the teacher at school would say, ask the social services to check on Ethan's dad because Ethan's coming without his clothes washed or whatever, and then they find out his dad's not looking after him because he's a drunk or he's a drug addict or whatever. That's probably the route. I don't think the police don't put you into rehab.
Okay.
So just like little things like that. That's my only point.
So like basic facts need to be finalised.
Just like people at my age who go, oh wait, if I watch that, I'd be like, that doesn't happen. And when someone's done that, then they're kind of not believing anything. So you kind of just have to make it feel real. If it's set in now, if it's set in the 70s, definitely people went to orphanages in the 70s.
Yeah.
But orphanages haven't happened for years and years. And I just think drink is a real problem. This is a story that kind of there'll be loads of stories out there that kind of have bits of this in, and the more you read
something a bit more relevant to modern day. If you could change anything about how the film is made or the opening sequence, what would you change?
intrigue people, haven't you? People want to kind of then. You talk about it earlier on about people trying to figure out what's going on. Like you can't give them too much away. You have to make it kind of a bit.
So do you like the kind of like suspended sort of atmosphere within the opening?
I think that'd be really good. And the opening sequence is not. He doesn't get to the house with all the drug paraphernalia. He's just sort of on the train, getting out off the train.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add?
You need to it's only because it's just a plot. You need to explore and stuff. There's like little elements of like, why is he the one that's all the other kids are picking on him? Why is he? Would you say he's inferior to all the others? Like it's exploring like, what is his weaknesses? Why are all the other kids picking on him? Why do they think they can bully him? Apart from just like his mum's died, because obviously they're an orphanage. They're all the parents have died probably, or haven't got parents. It's kind of figuring out
something a bit more like meaningful.
Yeah, what is his thing? Is he a little bit autistic, or is he can't talk to people, or is he kind of a little bit scrawny?
I like that. Having read our idea, what did you like about it?
Simple. It's good. Simple is always good. I think you've got kind of quite a lot of kind of creative license to do some interesting stuff. I mean, in terms of the structure, it seems like it's a sort of kind of almost like an extended sort of flashback. You're kind of not being particularly kind of linear in terms of the storytelling, are you?
No.
It seems like you start off at the train station and then we're going to go back, and you can
that's it. Yeah,
you can kind of create a lot of you can be quite abstract, I think, in a lot of the sort of the sequences, like particularly with how you kind of show the car crash, how you hear the car crash, how you sort of his experience in at the orphanage. That's all kind of ripe for lots of stuff. I mean, effectively the main body of the film really can happen at the train station in terms of his just him trying to sort of deal with it. So you've got like a whole sense of mystery and stuff is all obviously just going to be there inherent within the within the story. I mean, I think it's good.
Great. Is there anything that you would change about what you've read?
Not particularly. I mean, I think probably it's just sort of clarity in terms of what you're saying at various points. When Ethan turns 5, his dad's sent to rehab. So it's just going to be kind of like, for me, it's just like, his dad's sent to rehab by the government. I mean, it's just a question of whether or not you want to be like reading that. It kind of almost sounds a little bit like science fiction. His dad's sent to rehab by the government. Like it's kind of, you know what I mean? So
I see what you mean. Yeah.
It's a question of how sort of specific you want it, but it would be like his dad's sent to rehab by social services. And like it's kind of like if you're aiming for kind of sort of, I imagine that it's contemporary, it's set in present day, and all the rest of it. Then it's just little things like that in terms of actually writing. Rather than the idea itself, it's just the actual how it's presented. That I think you might just need to think about. I suppose you could do something. Maybe the letter's actually quite old, and he turns up, and I don't know. It sort of depends on whether or not on how redemptive you want the father to be. Like whether or not you actually want to kind of bring them together, whether or not you believe as a human being, and this is entirely up to you, but whether or not you believe as a human being that kind of people don't change, that if you're a drug addict, you're a drug addict and that's it, you're a drug addict for life, or whether or not you changed it in some way so that maybe, for example, if the letter's really old, I mean, Ethan's at like his lowest point. He's like looking forward to like meeting his dad. Maybe when he turns up, his dad doesn't recognize. I mean, I'd question how unrecognizable he would be to his father, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like whether or not, I mean, and also again, it sort of depends on how kind of decent you want to. I mean, all right. His dad's a drug addict, but it doesn't seem like he's. Well, certainly from what I've read, he's not like a criminal drug addict. He's somebody who needs help for a condition, effectively. So often in those sort of situations, social services would kind of keep them up to date with kind of how the kids are, even if it's a lie, you know, even if they're saying, yeah, he's doing wonderfully or whatever, in this orphanage, even if Ethan is having the worst time of his life, then, you know, they kind of, so, but what I was going to say there was that maybe if the letter's old, if it's kind of old sort of paperwork rather than a recent letter that has yet to be given to him, you know, maybe just gets it's got lost. It's been stuck in the right. It was misfiled. It was whatever happened to it.
Yeah.
Maybe he turns up and discovers that actually his dad's remarried and has a kid.
So you think that maybe he could be like, sort of like neglected further, but indirectly.
Yeah, exactly. That in a way, or that you know his, or maybe he doesn't sort of find a letter from his dad. Maybe it's just his dad's address. You know, social services, the orphanage would have his father's address on update, you know, an updated file. So Ethan goes because he's so miserable, because he's so depressed. He goes to try and find his dad, runs away from the orphanage, and turns up and discovers that his dad's, you know, that his dad's kind of got a new life.
Yeah.
Which is kind of more redemptive in terms of the dad, but also sort of slightly less redemptive because it's like, Jesus, this guy's, you know, got his life back on track and hasn't even bothered to get hold of his son. I don't know. I mean, like, that's the wonderful things about stories. You can take it in one of a billion different directions. And I think the direction that you've taken it in, I mean, you know, it works. Like, it completely works as a story.
Okay.
And if that's the story you want to tell, then go ahead, my friend. Like, you know, it's all there. It's all there on paper.
If this was you making talking about the opening sequence specifically, if this was you making the opening sequence, how would you approach it? What would be like some key features or elements?
I'd almost say that you kind of, the structure that you've got at the moment is very linear. It's kind of like, there's a boy called Ethan, you know, his mum's killed in a car crash, then his dad starts taking drugs and he ends up being sent to rehab, so Ethan ends up in an orphanage and Ethan's bullied and, you know, yada 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 yada, and then he ends up finding this letter, goes to this train station, and that's where our opening sequence begins. I'd almost think, again, just for clarity's sake, I'd consider rewriting the plot so that you put up, you know, we're at a train station, Ethan, 15 years old, is, you know, holding, you know, has got I don't know, coppers in his hand, or he's counting his change or whatever. You know, he's clutching onto some train tickets.
Yeah.
Looking at the clock, sees this couple fighting, and suddenly we are 10 years before. We're in a car. You know, blah 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 blah. You know, Ethan's fast. You know, Ethan's sleeping on the back seat, or you know, listening to his dad and his mum having an argument, or looking out of the window whilst his mum and his dad are having an argument. So I just think about how because at the moment, I wouldn't actually know how to shoot this. Like, in terms of, if I wouldn't know how to shoot the opening scene, because I don't really know on paper what the opening scene is until quite late.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It's kind of if you want to kind of give us an idea of what the actual story is and how the story unfolds in film time, then you need to restructure what you've written, which won't take long, but you could say it's all there. But just think about restructuring what you've written so that it happens in the order of events that we see it in the film.
All right.
Because you'll still get all the same information across,
just in a different way.
You'll just get it. You'll you know, and so you know, the whole idea being that when you're writing a treatment or when you're writing a script or something, is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to show the audience how the information is going to unfold, or rather the reader, the actor, the actress, the producer, the director of photography, the editor, whoever it is, that you're trying to show them how the action is going to unfold as you see it at the point that you make the film. Now, of course, that can all change, and there's, as long as it's written properly, there's absolutely no reason for you in the edit. You might want to start off, 10 years before when they're in the car driving home, and you start off with a car crash. That's entirely valid. But I think because you want to start off at the train station, then you should put that front and centre.
Okay. All right then. Well, it's been very helpful.